Hello and welcome to the Analytics Show, the podcast of business through the lens of data science. But together, we'll dive into learning and sharing where various industries are heading and how data and analytics is at the heart of shaping business growth and productivity. Let's spark different ways of thinking about data and analytics that is relevant to you and prepare your business for future disruption. I'm your host, Jason Tan. I'm delighted you could make it on this journey with us. Hey guys, to continue to get support tips, techniques, and tools and learn from the expert, hit that subscribe button wherever you are so we can keep in touch and continue our lifelong learning together. So, are you using your company data to its full potential? Take our embedded analytic assessment to find out your score. A leading organization like Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Netflix, and Google have moved beyond dashboard and embedded data science directly into their daily business operation. With our 3-minute test, you will discover your potential in optimizing customer experience and revenue through embedded analytics. You will gain greater clarity, insight, and advice to embed analytics. Plus, you will receive customized results instantly. Find the link to this assessment in the description of this episode. Hello, Craig. Welcome to Analytics Show podcast. So excited to have you here, and we have known each other for a long time. So good to talk to you again, especially in this setting of the podcast interview.
Oh, absolutely. No, thanks, Jason, for having me on. I'm really looking forward to our chat today.
It's good. Now, I noticed that you are volunteering at ADRA Australia. Would you mind to share a bit about your volunteering experience with this organization?
No, look, I'm glad that you actually started with that question because it's something I'm passionate about. And I think my father was a Christian minister, and as we were growing up, we weren't very well off, but living in Australia, I think we're so fortunate. And we really didn't sort of have need of anything. We had a great upbringing, and I've had good opportunities through my career, but always had a sense of the inequality, that's there in the world, and that other people in our communities and overseas have difficult lives for various reasons beyond their control. So whether it's war or famine, lack of education. So I guess from early times when I was first drawing a wage, I've been a supporter of ADRA. ADRA is an acronym for the Adventist Development and Relief Agency, and it's a global charity. It's focused on helping people when there are disasters, but as well as that, to provide support to the communities to build up both their resilience, but also the way they operate in fields of education and health and livelihoods, how they actually make a living. So, and locally, we run food banks, counselling services, and disaster support as well. So it's a registered government charity, and I've been fortunate enough to be a director of that since 2016, and really passionate about the mission that they've got, and the ability to actually sort of...
Wow, it seems like there's quite a bit to take on. And is it a monthly commitment thing that you are spending the time? Imagine it must take up quite a little bit of time.
Yeah, look, it does. Luckily, it's not monthly. It's quite efficient in that we meet around 5 times a year. There's also subcommittees like you have with a board. And for my sins, my actuarial background means that they like putting me on some of the finance, and strategy committees. So look, it's a little bit of juggling, but it's kind of something where, you kind of think about, what's important to you in life. And you'd probably know that everybody sort of makes time for what's important.
That's good, especially they make the best use of your actuarial background, which we will talk a little bit about that later on. Now, share with us about your current role as the Group Head of Data Science and Artificial Intelligence COE Center of Excellence at the Suncorp Group.
Great. No, look, I love this role. And to give you a little bit of background, I guess Suncorp now runs a hub and spoke operating model when it comes to data science and AI. So I lead the team that runs the centralized center of excellence. And basically there's 4 kind of key focal areas of what we do. The first 3 are kind of what you would expect from a COE. So the first one is that we kind of support the decentralized data scientists in our business units. And we do that by best practices and thought leadership and standards. Second one is that we actually drive the evolution of our data science ecosystem, including our platform. So by actually having a single kind of investment, a single place for all our enterprise data scientists to do their work and their development, there's great benefits in sharing and also getting most efficiency out of our investment. And the last one is to actually drive for the advocacy of accelerating the uptake and the investment in data science and AI across Suncorp. And so we do that by talking with senior executives, letting them know the state of the nation in terms of how are we going compared to competitors, and where are the opportunities across all of our business units to actually go faster than we are at the moment. But even though those three things are great and really enjoy that, the one that gets me out of bed is the fourth one, which is actually doing. And so I'm lucky that, yes, we run a COE, but we've also got the majority of our time is spent in actually developing so-called industrial, data science use cases. And I love that because I wouldn't want to just be advising if we weren't doing as well. I kind of feel like the best advice, comes if you're actually deep into the work and you actually understand all the issues involved in actually getting great data science built and productionized and delivering value. So that's why it's great, because the mandate is essentially to work across insurance and bank businesses, and a real kind of breadth of interesting work across, customer experience at one end, but then at the other end, this intelligent automation focus and also the cost saving initiatives, like you'd think your typical fraud detection and claims cost control initiatives.
Well, there is so many to unpack from that one, and we'll go through one-on-one later on.
Sure.
But let's give a bit of background and context about the Suncorp Group, especially for the listener who from overseas. I know we have about 25% American listeners, so would you please share a little bit about Suncorp Group?
Fantastic. No, thanks for the opportunity. I think what I'd say is that Suncorp is one of Australia's top 50 companies. We're one of the top or the largest insurers. We're either one or two, depending on which metric you use. And we also run a strong second-tier bank. So that's quite interesting to actually have banking and insurance in our business unit. The company purpose is to build futures and protect what matters. And I think that's really core in terms of some of the things I'm sure we're going to talk about next around analytics and how do we actually, help our customers. We've been around for 120 years, and so a lot of trust in the community, and we've got a large direct customer base as well as intermediated business across our insurance and banking businesses. And I think from interest from anyone who's into analytics or customer analytics and experience is that we've got 11 brands in our insurance business. And those 11 brands, sometimes we actually have multiple mass market brands in the same market. But it's also complemented by specialist or niche brands that all have a role to play, I guess, in our portfolio. And that actually brings extra opportunities, I guess, from an analytics point of view around how do you optimize those? How do you actually help customers potentially find the right brand and the right value proposition? The last thing I just want to say about Suncorp is being headquartered in Queensland. Queensland is in northern Australia and a large part in kind of the tropical area. And so we do get a large number of cyclone and natural flood, natural hazard events. And so our DNA, we're very strong advocates for greater investment in preventative kind of measures, both in terms of building standards, building technologies, so that we help obviously when bad times come and houses get ruined or damaged or are completely destroyed. But really the better outcome is if communities and individuals can actually make their housing much more resilient in the first place. And so there's a lot of advocacy work that we pride ourselves on in terms of strengthening communities. So, and also our bank is really going ahead with sustainability initiatives. And one of their taglines is doing well by doing good. And so some exciting times and initiatives that are going to be developed in our bank over the next year or so.
Fascinating. You reminded me of the old days when I used to work for Suncorp, and I worked for you at one point of time as well. Some of those initiatives that we had done to help that was a fond memory. That is how I actually pick up a lot of my skills and the knowledge back in the old days working with you and other people at Suncorp Group. Now, as you mentioned, it has the banking, and then also there are 11 brands for just the insurance alone. Given of this business diversity, how important, in your view, is it to have the Center of Excellence model for data science and AI at an organization like Suncorp?
Yep. That's a great question. And I guess that I'm biased, obviously, but I'm COE, so I'm going to say, yeah, best idea ever. But no, I think there's some very good logic around why you'd want a COE. So I think the obvious one is that by having a COE, you can act as the glue between different business units. I think most people that have worked in organizations know that it's very, very easy to get silos. You can have pockets of whether it's data scientists or analytics professionals over the business, and it's busy and you just don't get the time. Or you don't have the setup to be able to share. So that is one of the things that we see ourselves as being the glue, I guess, between those analytics communities and the data scientist communities. And we do that, through our through our thought leadership. And as I mentioned to you, just the fact that we've actually got a single place to do advanced analytics and data science and get it productionized is a great kind of connectivity. And so far, our decentralized model is all hanging in there in terms of developing within this single platform. So that's pretty exciting. But I think the thing that may not be as obvious is that by having a centralized team, if the centralized team comes with a reasonable scale of investment, and I know that not all organizations will be able to do this, but luckily we've got reasonable. We don't have an army of people, but we've got a reasonable team. What that allows is then the ability to hire some top-end talent. And I guess I'm a big fan of getting the best team that you can. Big fan of the concept of the 10x developer. And even if you don't believe that the best are 10 times better, that might be hype. But my experience,
I actually believe it.
well, I think that my experience is it's certainly a multiple. So definitely getting the best people you can. And you can do that if you've got a bit of scale. It also means that you're not I know that some small teams, they can sort of build up a little capability around a single kind of, influential data scientist. But if they move on, what do? It kind of leaves you kind of left. So having a bit of scale means that you're not sort of kind of at risk of the whole thing falling down or, losing momentum as talented people move on as well. And I think the last thing is that scale allows you also to get a diversity, of skills, because even though people probably think of data scientists, analytics professionals as one, I'm sure that when you've come across, there are different talents. You've got the highly technical. Some are great, theoreticians. Some are great practical people. Others are great talkers and marketing, people, all with a data science, or analytics background. And there's a role that you need for all of them. It'd be nice to get that in a unicorn, all in one. But the reality is, and it's a much more kind of sustainable practice to actually make sure that you've got the breadth of skills in your team. That's very doable if you've got a little bit of scale and a little bit of investment to do that. So, and the last thing I'd say about a centre of excellence is if it's set up in a way that it's got a little bit of like discretionary funding, meaning that you can actually have some of your data scientists kind of follow and work with kind of business executives that have got great ideas. And you actually use a very limited amount of funding to help them just spin up a prototype or test an idea out to see if it works. And then if it's working, you actually then go through the heavy technology process of, business case, governance, project teams, scaled engineering, and all that kind of stuff. But I've seen that that's been hugely beneficial because in some organizations, if it's really difficult and you have to put up a business case just to test out ideas, then how do you actually ever get innovation happening?
Correct.
So our COE in the way that's been set up has been very fortunate to actually have had that kind of ability to get involved and actually test out some fantastic ideas with the business, many of which that have actually gone on to being, quite value generating, scaled initiatives.
And I think that model has proven to work really well in the state for the companies like Google famously has got someone working in the background 30% of the time just to do the Gmail, and look at where Gmail it is today.
Yeah.
That model, and I suspect that perhaps they also have some of those guys doing the same thing for the fintech and also in the banking and all of these things, which they are also increasing their footprint in the financial sector, especially with Apple as well.
Yep.
My next question then, if we follow up with that is, what do you think, apart from what you described about spin off the experiment and do such a thing to compete with this big tech, what can the financial service industry do to win the long game?
Yeah, look, wow, that is a huge question, I reckon. That is the billion-dollar question, isn't it? It makes, and it's a great question. We could talk for ages on this, but what it makes me think about is actually probably more than 10 years ago, Jeff Bezos, obviously CEO and founder of Amazon, was asked a question about, Jeff, what's going to change in the next 10 years? Give us a view of what's going to change. And his response was, actually, that's the wrong question. What I want to do is I want to know what's not going to change. And he says that question is more important, because if what's not going to change, you can build a strategy about it. And the punchline of that whole kind of quote is that he was saying that in 10 years' time, my customers are not going to want things cheap. They're going to want things delivered fast, and they're going to want a vast selection of products. He said no one's ever going to come to me in 10 years and say, look, we love Amazon, but we just wish you delivered a little bit slower. Prices are a bit higher. So he said that those are kind of absolutes. And as you know, this was 10 years ago. He's built his whole business model, around cheaper, faster delivery and a broad array. And look how, successful he's been. And the pandemic has just added, to his business model going through the roof. So why I'm sort of bringing that up is that I think there's an analog to the financial services context. I think if we think about what are customers going to need, no matter how the products and how the kind of the fintech world and all of the crypto, kind of world and decentralized finance, what they're going to need in the future is they're still going to need to be financially secure. They're going to want to build wealth. We all want our assets to be protected. And it kind of feels like no matter what sort of how the world changes, that's going to be kind of a constant. And so protection of the really big things that are important to you, like your house, your car, and very much your income, if you think about that. Now, similar to kind of Bezos' strategy also, financial services have got to be focusing on making sure that things are cheaper, and faster, seamless service. That's true. But there is a difference, I think, that we would build on to what Bezos is saying, because when you are talking about your life savings and you're talking about the assets and most important to you and your income, the trust element, is hugely different. Earlier this week, I got Amazon delivery, 24-hour Prime delivery. I love it. New sneakers. But the trust I've got is that, like, if they don't deliver that or it gets lost in the mail, I'm upset. But it's
exactly.
But when you're talking about kind of these huge things, the trust element is enormous. And so I guess that's the other thing that I'd wrap around. So with that, in mind, in terms of what's not going to change, where I think existing institutions need to take it up to meet the fintechs, the Googles. So you've got the big kind of Silicon Valley at one side, but those behemoths. And then you've got the little fintech startups at the other end, and you've got like a whole range of things in between. So where I think from the company's point of view is, I'm going to say, while product innovation is important, the real one that I would drill in is customer experience innovation.
Yes.
And bottom line is, I think that when I talk about customer experience innovation, it's a bit of a kind of a buzzword. But what do I mean? I think it comes down to simplistically, if an organization knows what I'm needing in the moment and is able to kind of help me get that quickly, and fast and without the hassle, people don't get excited about financial services. That's not something people love doing in terms of buying insurance or checking bank balances and making sure you got enough funds and all that kind of stuff. So I guess if I'm actually in the moment and I've just bought my first house and I'm wanting insurance, but I'm not sure about what sum insured I should, put, or what are these kind of funny options, I want like a system, and I think it's a data-driven or an AI-enabled system. So if I go onto the website or I'm on the call center, I want to quickly be able to get that information. I don't want to be clicking through, 7 different screens and trying to search things. I actually want that to be seamless. I want the organization to kind of know that I've got those needs and find that information super quick. I think on the other side then is that if we've got this kind of seamless provision of services around what I need to transact in the short term, the other element is that if they're able to understand where I'm going from a medium term kind of financial well-being or my financial goals, and they can help me with that, then that sort of builds an entire another level of value. So this is like, take if I was earlier in my career and I'm sort of needing to save for a house, wanting to save for a family, is that I'd be happy for my organization to kind of help me recognize that I'm on that part of the journey, and maybe they help me with saving tips based on the data that they've got about me and the insights that they can help, or maybe they actually help with incentives along the way in terms of how you accumulate that deposit faster. So I kind of feel like, in summary, your question is great. And we could certainly keep going on about that. But I really think, that organizations that are kind of truly centered around the customer, their needs now and in the future, and bringing relevant and seamless services to them, you're going to win out, I believe, no matter what the future holds.
I so agree. I think especially for someone like myself who is more of the technical background, who was like building things, it took me quite a long time to wrap around my head to understand that what is important to understand from the human psychology. And over the last number of years, I developed this thing that I help myself to understand is what I call the human analytic framework, because fundamentally those things will never change. Like as a human, we are a social being. We want to have connection, and that is where Facebook or Tinder come into the picture. We want the things to be delivered fast. We don't want to have those hassle, and that's how Apple, Amazon come into the picture. And those things will never change. And it is so important, like you say, that it is apart from all the fancy things, it really just comes down to that customer. And if we can focus on that, and you have given quite a number of the example of like how the FSI can and focus on that. The other thing that I probably want to ask then is, with the ability to crank out all of those startups with the permission provided, etc., FSI, bank, insurer technically would know so much better about a customer. Has that led you, and also for my research, is you have used some of the data to build the model, like for example, the next best action, the next best offer to reduce the churn rate.
Yes.
Do you think this also can be incorporated into that bigger picture that you just described, the next generation of the customer engine and experience?
Yeah, and the short answer is absolutely. And I think it's quite interesting to reflect on, you used the terminology next best offer. And there's been like there's an evolution. Next best offer, I guess, was one of the first sort of generations of models. And for those people who aren't sort of familiar with that term, many will be, by the way, but this was kind of early on, which is I've got a customer that's on the phone, or maybe they're on the website, or maybe I'm thinking about sending them a piece of mail or an SMS or an email. The next best offer was all around, what is the product I want to flog them? And it actually got a lot of bad press, especially when when organizations became sort of more wary of selling practices that were kind of more coercive, and we've been through a royal commission. So really what the next evolution of that wasn't just models that were just flogging product. The next evolution was next best action. And the reason why next best action differs to next best offer is that the action was a much more holistic set of things. So, for instance, if I've just bought a product or an insurance policy, maybe the next best thing is not to try and sell me another one, but the best thing is to help me understand how to use it better, or what is covered there, or anything else from an onboarding point of view. The other thing that we've talked about internally is maybe the next best thing is to do absolutely nothing. Because they've had enough contact. Again, leave them alone, and that would be a fantastic customer service. So the whole idea about next best action being the next step of the evolution is that it doesn't just consider sales. It considers trying to help them with service, with information, potentially things like loyalty, connecting them in with loyalty programs, rewarding them, for their loyalty to the organization. Obviously, there's a sales component, and definitely, to your point, the idea that retention is just such a important focus now and into the future, or for the whole kind of all the technology and all the analytics, retention is still one of the biggest use cases, which is, many people on the podcast will know that the cost of acquiring a new customer is enormous compared to, the effort to keep happy your existing customers. And again, those analytic models that actually help you understand the likelihood, who are the high value, high risk customers, so that they can be flagged, and then your organization can think about what's the right actions, what's the right sort of set of messages and incentives, to make sure that those customers are staying with you is absolutely core. But the thing I wanted to sort of just wrap all of that up in is that those next best action and next best offer models focused on churn, definitely a big part, but now I guess the next generation is so much broader, I guess, in terms of the things that the decision engine, is able, to serve up, rather than just a recommendation of a product, the breadth of services and incentives across different channels.
I also want just to shed some light from a different angle of looking at this thing, which is if we were to look at this from the perspective of the core consultant who is serving the insurance customer, or maybe the claim, or maybe the banking customer at the call center, they already have so much at hand that they need to do to be able to serve that customer. I think if we can help them to reduce the workload and also help with that cognitive idea about, okay, what are the best things that he or she could actually help the customer while on the phone with the data and analytics running in the background, and then have it ready in front of the screen for them, it will make the job much easier, and then make it so much more professional and for them to be able to help the customer. Because we can't imagine the consultant would have to look through the screen and say, okay, what have these guys have to start over the last 180 days? That I think is so important, that this whole idea about embedding the analytics as part of the customer experience is so important.
Look, I think you've hit on to something really, really important there, which is the analytics, the data science can't just add cognitive load to the humans in the loop, contact center consultants or operational decision makers. So
correct.
You're right. And this whole idea about there's a massive tie-in, between behavioral science, behavioral economics, and how we actually deploy AI. So you're right. How do you actually sort of get the limited amount of information? Because if somebody's on a phone call, they want to have a natural conversation, with our customer. They're not wanting to be distracted by all these different facts and figures. The other option is that there's a lot of kind of thinking around the psychology of how do you actually serve up the potential next best action or next best conversation. And one line of thinking that I'm quite, partial to is that don't give a single kind of, this is what you must do. The idea that the contact center consultant is going to know in the moment exactly the mood, of the individual. And we want our AI to get better to kind of realize these things in real time. But really, at this point in time, the contact center consultant's knowing how it's going and kind of what the customer's needing. So one of the things we've been thinking about in the design of serving this up is, do you give the top 3 possibilities and allow the contact center consultant to choose, from those? So rather than being didactic, saying that this is the only thing you should be doing, with your customer, give them the minimum amount of context so that they're not overwhelmed, but give them the ability, to take the conversation in a natural way. They can judge whether it's the right time to talk about another service. And that obviously has to be wrapped up in our whole compliance regime around, making sure that any sales conversations are compliant.
Correct.
But maybe the best thing is to be quiet and not sort of talk about any other services, just get the transaction done. But other times it might be that there's other services that could help them.
And other services, including, like, for example, if the customer is making a claim, which is in quite a distressed situation, what are the things and what are the tools or what are the information that could be helpful to this particular customer at that particular point in time and that particular instant as well? Those are the things that can be done.
Yeah. And that leads to a great, customer experience.
Now, for those who come from the world of the customer, the traditional customer segmentation, can you put shed some light in a way that how is this different from that angle then?
Yeah, look, I'm glad that you asked this question actually, because it does differ from traditional segmentation. Now, you might have heard of this really good illustration, so apologies if anyone's heard this one, but I love it. So it says, if you consider, I've got two British men that I'm wanting to put in a segment. They're both in the age group of 70 to 75. They're both of the same age. They're both wealthy. They both like sports cars and dogs, and they like holidaying in the Alps. So you'd think, based on kind of those data points, that they would respond similarly, to the same advert or offer. So we could put them in a segment. The only problem is that these 2 British men, 2 princes, the first one is Prince Charles.
That's a nice
Another one is also another Prince, but it's the Prince of Darkness. It's Ozzy Osbourne. I don't know if anyone knows Ozzy Osbourne was a rocker back in the age of Black Sabbath and a heavy metal rocker. So it's just quite interesting that comes back to your question around segmentation is typically like large groups, of people. It's certainly data driven and it is certainly more effective than a scattergun approach. But typically you've still got a large amount of difference, I guess, between customers in those segments. So where kind of the new kind of approach to customer segmentation is around trying to understand individual characteristics at a broader and deeper level. So really understanding recent interactions that you've had, with the organization, trying to get, a broader set of data points so that you actually are kind of differentiating customers that might actually at a high level seem to be in the same segment based on, again, what are they needing in the moment and where are they going from their financial well-being. So that's why many people will have heard of the concept of a segment of one. So it is an extension. All that we're talking about is really just extending those segments, but trying to drill down by the use of data science where you've got predictive models that basically come up with a score, for each individual that you've got around particular propensities. So what's the likelihood that this particular customer, will lapse their policy? What's the likelihood that this particular customer likes dealing through digital channels only? So all of those things actually start building up a very rich, kind of understanding based on actual facts about them, also around inferences around what they're likely to be needing, how they're likely to respond to different scenarios. And that's where you do get the difference between a granular individual prediction and the traditional customer segmentation approach.
Hey all, I just want to give a quick shout out about this episode. It's sponsored by the Embedded Analytic Program at DDA. And the Embedded Analytic Program is designed for senior manager and executive in the business team who want to integrate data science into daily business operation and use it to drive customer experience excellence and revenue. And book unlimited strategy session for a full year and start embedding analytics into the business frontline. For more information about this program, please refer to the description of this episode. Now, let's get on back to the interview. If I were to use the Amazon as an analogy, imagine Amazon Jeff Bezos going down the road of just the customer segmentation. He literally would just only offer exactly the same product to Prince Charles and the Prince of Ops, whereas he goes down to the idea that if he has 20 million customers, that should be 20 million individual unique stores for all of those customers.
Yeah. Yep, absolutely. And you can see how that's been a great customer experience going on there. Same thing with Netflix, although sometimes Netflix, recommendations can be kind of not as great. But the concept's right, is that let's kind of understand you and what have you been doing and what have you liked and kind of profile that against a really granular data set, to actually serve up other things that you would like.
Fascinating. Now I want to take this conversation to a slightly different angle. And I remember speaking with Tim Johnson, who is also from Suncorp. So he shared with me and the listener how the role of the automation, intelligent automation works. My question for you then is, if we were to wrap the whole thing and those two aspects of the technology together, do the works that you both do converge at some point in perfecting that customer experience? I know the perfect word is a little bit extreme, but let's say that is the direction that we are aiming or striking towards.
Yeah, look, I really like this question. So first of all, it's good that you've brought up Tim Johnson because his team and my team are tied at the hip. Tim goes around saying that he and I are brothers by different mothers. I'll take that as a compliment. We have a fantastic collaboration. So as your podcast listeners would know, Tim runs automation, and automation across the enterprise for Suncorp. So you can see that we provide his kind of robotics platforms and initiatives with, I guess, some of the intelligence from a data science and AI point of view. So a lot of their platforms can already do a lot of smart stuff. But at a certain point in time where there are documents and there's more nuanced understanding of the language, the text, the structure of the information, we often get involved in actually providing some of those kind of insights or some of those kind of predictions that actually help for the next level of decisioning or automation. So a really good sort of tie-in together. Now, your question around does it converge? And I think it does. They do converge, because some of the initiatives we have done together with Tim's team are really focusing on how do we free up people in our organisation to do higher value work, and how do we get customers to get their service much faster. And we do that by, we can automate putting estimates on claims. We're alerting claims that need intervention because they need to have somebody push it to the next stage of the process or communicate with a customer. We also built things that identify charging anomalies from our builders. We have a lot of house repairs, or ones that automatically classify documents that are coming in, because we can automatically use our machine learning to say, actually, that document should go to this queue and this person. And so where the convergence comes is in two parts. And the first one is kind of just what I said, that it's no good having a fantastic experience at the front end, buying a policy or setting up a new home loan or applying for a new home loan, if then you're stuck in a queue, and when you need the insurance company, when your car has crashed or your home has got a tree come through the roof, you might have had a fantastic sales perspective. You love the marketing, you love the AAMI ads, but then the actual experience of getting your house repaired or getting an answer around whether I can extend my loan to do a renovation, if that's kind of just stuck for days and days. So those automation processes are kind of it's the twin sort of side. It's the flip side of the front end sales process, is that you've actually got to come up with the goods when it comes to actually fulfilling the particular services. So that's kind of one mode, where it all comes together. The second mode is kind of from an economic point of view. Intelligent automation is obviously looking for efficiency in your cost base. Both how do you be more effective in the way that you use your talented staff, but also there are real initiatives, and we've talked about insurance fraud or looking for leakage. So where we're paying the wrong amounts to suppliers. So getting intelligent automation right actually keeps costs low. And that means that actually then our prices, our premiums and our fees can be kept low while still giving a decent return to our shareholders. And so without actually having that side of the equation, we're not going to be able to have competitive products. So they're the two reasons I'd say that the two absolutely need to go hand in glove.
What would be your advice for the organization who are putting these sort of multiple teams together from different disciplines in creating that powerful customer engine and experience?
Yeah. Well, I think many of your listeners are going to be sort of very aware of the agile way of working. And I'm a big fan, even for large technology projects, because something like that we've been working on, customer experience, you've got to have business and tech absolutely working seamlessly together. So one very simple thing is that I'm a big fan of having that collaborative approach, because when we think about if you're going to a serious deployment of customer experience, decisioning engines, and all of the data structures that need to go to make them successful, it's a big tech project. But at the end of the day, that tech has got to be focused on the right use cases and the right initiatives. So as you said, you're bringing lots of different teams together. If you're actually doing kind of customer experience across the entire organization, then you're by definition, you're looking at different products, different business units, different channels, and you've got different executives that are kind of running each of those kind of areas. So they're definitely, from a business organization point of view, you need to actually have mechanisms where all of those leaders are coming together and there is alignment around how are you going to sequence the evolution of how do we actually start making these customer experiences really data driven. So there's definitely the tech and business alignment, as well as how do you actually sequence out? How do you actually work out which is the best area, which customer journey? Is it a retention journey? Is it a sales journey? Is it a service one that you want to start off with? How do you actually get the kind of the wins on the board and then kind of iterate from there? So that would be kind of some initial thoughts in terms of how you get started.
And also, I would imagine also, how do you nudge the customer, or how do you stay in touch with the customer beyond just the sales period, beyond just the claim experience? How do you maintain the contact in depth between, so that they know that the company is thinking of them rather than those two periods?
Absolutely. And that's why this whole thing around behavioral science, understanding the mindset of the customer.
Exactly.
The concept of customer journeys is almost like a bit of a cliche that's been sort of bandied around so much in the industry, but I'm such a big fan of it because it comes back to your point. It's not all about just the sales and then just leave them, and you talk to them once every 5 to 10 years when they have a claim. Especially in the insurance business, is how do you actually sort of continue, to work out how to be relevant and how to actually interact with customers in a broader sense. And I guess that comes back to really good thinking from our customer experience people in the business around designing the experiences. What do we want to do with our customers, and how do we actually be relevant and actually give them value through the course of the life cycle, not just at those typical selling and fulfilling perspective. So absolutely, that's got to be core when you're actually setting up the analytics capability then to actually do all the smarts and the tech to enable it.
What is so interesting about that is it popped into my mind that to some extent, I feel like Google, Amazon, and Apple have a extreme unfair advantage over any other company. What I mean by that is they have a product where they have a constant touch point with all the existing customer or the future customer, which means, like, for example, as much as because I use Google to do search multiple times a day, the chances that I would be more likelihood to use their Google Ads services is going to increase significantly when I consider that.
Yeah.
I use Amazon and buy things, and which means also I will be more likelihood to use all the services. Those are the unfair advantage where they have a part of the business that have multiple touch points. With that in mind, the FSI may not necessarily have that sort of a product like Google and Amazon, that sort of unfair advantage. How do you think the FSI can replicate that experience then without trying to become another Google, without trying to be providing the search engine or trying to sell stuff like Amazon?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and I think it's certainly one that is on the minds of insurance executives and financial services executives because of the power. Many of the internet services, are kind of channeled, through the search engines. I guess the thing is that the financial services companies, though, have their own kind of advantage, and I guess this is from a strategy point of view. How do you actually leverage the advantage that we have? The advantage that we have, I guess, on the banking side of things is that with kind of permission with our customers to utilize the data that we have on them, nothing would be done against the privacy kind of legislation. But with an open kind of value exchange with our customers, all of the information around the financial well-being of the individual, both retail customers and business customers through our banking. There's an amazing set of information that Google is not going to have.
Correct.
Well-being. So I guess it comes back to one of the earlier questions. If we mobilize around those set of needs and the information that we have as part of providing banking services, the analog, by the way, to that in terms of the unfair advantage on a insurance point of view is that insurers have amazing information, around the assets that count. All of the home and, mobility, we call it mobility, but you're talking about cars, all of that kind of stuff from an insurance point of view, and also income and life insurance, means that even though the touch points aren't as great, the knowledge, I guess, of what our customers are trying to do, what their asset holdings are, how to actually be relevant for them to manage those assets is kind of where we actually can utilize our information, I guess, and continue to be relevant. And I think in that case, we can actually withstand a lot of the potential to be disrupted by some of the silicon.
It also got me thinking about another extreme example would be, say, Airbnb. Airbnb is, on the other hand, where the customer only come to use and look at their product or the services only once a year or once every few years, or perhaps some people twice a year. But equally, they have that low touch point, but obviously they are doing some of the things right where customer continue to come back to that.
Correct. Yep. But it's definitely one that we do think about, and I think that will be one of the innovation points over the next kind of decade, is how do FSIs become more relevant, to their customers, and potentially with a broader set of services.
We spoke about Google earlier, and one of the things that I know is Google is phasing out cookies on website. So many organization companies are starting to prepare for that challenge and build a customer data platform. Would you say all the learning or the work that we have discussed so far will become important add-ons for the customer data platform?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you're absolutely right. So a strong customer data platform is essential to these decision engines being effective. So, and for those people who aren't sort of familiar with the term, a customer data platform is the ability to bring together all of the information that you have, on your customers in a single place, so that other kind of, whether it's a decision engine or other kind of marketing channels, can utilize that and have a single consistent understanding, of the customer and their interactions with us, who they are, what they have done, what they need. It picks up, I think we talked about this a little earlier, it picks up both facts and, predictions. And so that's absolutely vital. And so in the world, yes, where cookies are kind of being phased out, the ability for these kind of customer data platforms to kind of enhance the experience, both for your existing customers, but also for prospects and not yet customers, is absolutely foundational. And I think more and more organizations are getting their customer data organized and ready to use in such a format.
Now, wrapping all of those topics together and without revealing any trade secret, what is your advice for other companies in the industry to get started using intelligent automation and data analytics, data science to build a better customer experience?
Yeah, good. I think I'd probably start off just giving some kind of generic insights, around kind of what has worked and what hasn't worked. And the first thing is whether you're talking about intelligent automation, or if you're wanting to get started, not with, a massive, all-pervasive, customer experience program, but you're just wanting to start in improving your customers in a channel for a particular product and a particular part of their journey, is a data science team is really going to need to start off with finding an owner, a process owner or an owner of a customer experience or a channel that's enthusiastic to actually innovate. And importantly, not just having the right mindset and the time to spend on it, but having the budget and the ability to actually get the data science embedded into the process that they own. Because early on in our journey in running a data science team, we did a great piece of work for one of our internal stakeholders. And after sort of delivering the kind of the experiment to show that it was giving an uplift, we came to the recognition that kind of stakeholder actually couldn't do anything with it. They could not operationalize it because the systems were going through upgrades, and integration of our work just wasn't going to happen for more than a year. And it was kind of a real lesson to us that to actually get started up front, to have a quick understanding around not only what you're trying to do, with the actual data science asset, but all of those other things, is that what is the pathway to production? Have we got the ability, and has the stakeholder that we're working with truly got the ability to get this in and running? So that was kind of one learning. I think that, the idea of the executive mindset is that there is a big difference between people that executives have got the time and the focus to innovate, and those that are potentially run off their feet and just have to be focusing on short-term operational issues. So if you've got the luxury, and I know that not every team does, the luxury to find kind of area, the right business owner, the right executive, the right group, and the right opportunity to get started, that's really important. Because yes, being able to actually sort of build up the profile of your team through wins is kind of critical. I think that once you've got the right kind of starting position, then really what you're trying to do is, if it's intelligent automation, it's actually going through their processes and identifying pain points. And this is where it's the best outcome that I've seen, in my career, is where you've got the perfect combination of business expert plus a process, designer or a customer experience designer, plus potentially an automation person and a data scientist. And that kind of combination of skills is super powerful. If they're working in a collaborative squad and you're actually leveraging the best of the business around what they're trying to do, and then you've got the technology people, the data scientists and automation people saying, this is the art of the possible, this is what you could do. There's a two-way conversation there. And if you've actually got the trust, between all the parties, so that it's not like a servant, a kind of a master-servant relationship where you're just getting told what to do, but it genuinely, is a collaboration where everybody's, contributing to the outcome.
Yep.
That has been super, kind of profitable for us. So that would be kind of some of the things. I know that we're probably running out of time, but the other thing is that, measuring, I guess, is just so important in terms of, again, try and get something that is a quick win, but try and get something that has got a measurable, kind of outcome, I think, because it's only after that that you can actually say, yes, we've actually done something. It's materially changed the business with that sort of trust and credibility to then kind of move on to higher value things.
I agree. Well, just on the note about the time, we have the time, so that's completely okay, provided you have the time. So I clear out the afternoon for this and doing some other work, but we have the time. I just
Sorry.
Yeah. I just want to highlight that. I think it's so true about that value added, and also have a quick win. Prove the value, reiterate, improve the platform, and then subsequently make it bigger and bigger. I think one of the challenges, or sometimes I think the mistake that I seen, is that maybe perhaps sometimes people are just trying to do too much from the get-go. They pretty much want to build the search engine of Google of what it is today, but they forgot that it took Google 20 plus years to build it is what it is today, right? I think that is a mindset that is so important. And any of those things can get started. Like for myself, as soon as these podcasts finish recording, where it gets saved on Zoom, I got an automation that it just automatically transfer from Zoom to Google Drive, and then subsequently email the team member about all of these things. All those things can be done so quickly. Just prove the value and then go on and do
Correct.
things.
Correct.
Yeah. Now, on the other side of the token, I want to ask you, what are some of the key lessons from your experience in building these customer engine and platform that you want to share to the data scientist professional and also the business professional?
Yeah, great. So yeah, I'd reflect on the last bit, and I just think that the combination of the different skill sets, where you don't actually have business versus tech or data scientist versus marketing professional, coming together is super. The other one that I'll reflect on is, what we talked about up front is get the best team that you can for your budget, and the concept that less can be more. So a smaller team, if you've got the ability to set the team up in a way, a smaller team of highly effective individuals, if you are working on transformational type projects with a bit of complexity, go for a smaller team of highly, talented people, because of my experience that, people at the top of their game, can be so much more productive. They can do things quicker. They have the credibility of the business when they interact, because you can tell if somebody knows their stuff. Even if they're a technical person, it's pretty straightforward many times for our business stakeholders to see, quality. So that's what I would say. The other thing that's been really important, I think, is sometimes you hear the mantra, machine learning, data science is all about letting the data speak. And I, to a certain degree, I agree with that kind of statement. But on the other hand, I'm an enormous advocate of your team essentially being very well versed in the business process or the customer process that's generating the data, that you're analyzing.
Yes.
So the reason for this is that, without the context, you can run into so many problems. So without context around essentially what that process is, what's in the minds of the customers, what are in the minds of the decision makers in operational processes like claims or loan approvals, you might actually bring together a data science model that actually misfires, because you actually missed out picking up some of the, data sources, because you're not going to have all the information you need. If you don't have the entire universe of information, you may have problems if you don't start off with a hypothesis, I guess, of the information that you need to feed into the models to actually get the appropriate predictions. And I've actually seen instances where that kind of agnostic approach without understanding the business has actually led to really bad outcomes.
That's so true. Sorry, keep going.
No, that's fine. No, I'm happy to hear your question.
I wanted to give a quick shout out and also a context about your background. So I know Kit for more than a decade. It's a great qualified actuary. So what I have found personally is having worked with the actuaries and also worked in the IT team, I felt that one of the key differences is I think actuaries are not just trained in the statistical analysis and the mathematical model and those sort of things, but also trained in a way that to understand the business context, also the industry. And that sort of training and that sort of academic background certainly has pushed the actuaries to think about the bigger picture, which is beyond than just the data analytic, data science model or the statistical model, but it is about how to apply those things in economic context and a business context. I sometimes feel like the people who come from the IT background probably focus a little bit too much about the software side of it. And for example, that we should be using, what is the data, all of those things, and haven't involved enough to understand the business. Because at the end of the day, if the model is not working for the business, why do we even do that?
Yeah. I think they're a really good set of reflections, and it certainly ties in with when we're hiring, and we've got a bunch of great people that have come in from the IT backgrounds, PhDs in machine learning. One of the things that we're really keen for is in the hiring process, we actually give them, even if they're very senior, to actually give them a business problem with a data set for them to actually play with. And what we're looking for in the hiring process is the ability to actually come back and have an approach. And I'm not as worried about whether they have all of the detail around ensemble models and recurrent neural networks and all of the kind of the sexy stuff. I mean, I want them to actually understand and be able to utilize those in the right use cases. But importantly, it's a matter of the holistic understanding of how do we actually generate value, from all of the cool algorithms and models. And so that's actually something that we explicitly test for in our process. And it certainly differentiates kind of people that will be great theoretically, but not, able to actually demonstrate value in practice. And it's been a very, very beneficial, way of how we actually sort of work through who are the candidates that we want to hire.
Fascinating. Now, this is sadly coming to almost the end. So these are my two questions that I have for you. Number one, what is your most important first principle?
First principle. So I think, and this sort of ties back not just my work in data science, but also what I do with kind of our non-for-profits and kind of those director roles is I really think that you need to be thinking, no matter what context, is what we are doing the most important thing, the most valuable thing that lines up, with the goals of the organization. I'm a big believer in the idea of cascading strategy, meaning that when we sort of sit down and my leadership team, myself sit down and we actually plot out our data science strategy, it can't, exist in a vacuum. We need to kind of understand where is the business going, what's going to be important, what's going to actually really look like success for the business. And so we have to start with the corporate challenge, that whole idea of building wealth and protecting what matters. But then you actually go down, one level to understand the business unit strategies. What are the key things? Not every business unit is going to do everything in every year because there's just so many things to transform. Right. So how do we actually connect ourselves and align ourselves to the small number of high profile things that the organization is wanting to achieve? And that's not just in business, that's also in not-for-profits. And so I'd come back to the first principle around understand what constitutes, value in the organization you're serving and make sure that everything that you do is aligned, because it's so easy. I'm sure that there's many analytics, professionals listening that we all come from that analytics background where we love potentially going down little rabbit holes and it's so interesting to kind of go and test this and have a look at that. But at the end of the day, you've got to kill some of those ideas and refocus yourself on the stuff that's going to generate value.
100%. Final question. What is one book that you have read and thought it would have been better for your younger self to have?
Yeah, this is a good question. And it's one that made me reflect, actually. I think The one that comes to mind is a book called Making Ideas Happen. And you'll probably recognize that it's a common theme. It's by an author called Scott Belsky. And the subtitle of the book is Overcoming Obstacles Between Vision and Reality. And I think that for me, as a kind of a younger, kind of actuary and a younger kind of data science practitioner, it would have really, I think, accelerated my kind of learning around what I can see clearly now is that organizations and teams, I think, ideas are generally well understood, that lots of innovation. I think innovation from an idea perspective is not necessarily the thing, that kind of holds organizations back. It's actually the dirty business of transforming. And that's why making ideas happen, that's kind of, the differentiator between good teams and great teams. And it's got like a provocative quote in there that sort of talks about that the way that you organize your projects is more important than the quality of your ideas. Now that's an extreme statement, but I think they're trying to take you in a particular direction. I think that I think is helpful is to understand, yes, you've got to have innovative and great ideas clearly, but a great idea that never gets executed is worth zero. And it's worth negative. It's not even zero, it's negative because you're wasting time, and resources on potentially, thinking about it, considering about it, or trying to develop it. And the other thing, I guess, for my younger self is there's another nugget of gold. And the quote says, everyone with the gift of creativity has a series of tendencies that can become obstacles. The journey to a more productive life as a creative leader starts with a candid self-assessment of who you are, your tendencies, and the greatest barriers before you. And I think it's brilliant because it comes back to how do you build a team around you?
Yes.
So how do you actually be very aware of the things, as it says, tendencies that can become obstacles in the way you operate, and either try and sort of work through those yourself or have a team, around you that compensate or, complement where you might have a blind spot or not as strong. So it was a great set of reflections in that book for me.
Absolutely. I so agree what you have just shared, especially the last part, recognizing and seeing what ourselves are good at and not good at, and then how to find a team to compensate that. It's so true. Yeah. One thing that I still have to do. But thank you so much, Craig. That was fascinating and wrapping around all of those customer experience and customer engine for the FSI. Love it. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me on, Jason. It's been great. They're a great set of questions to talk through. I'm sure we could have gone on for a long time.
I know. Well, we'll do it again next time. Thank you so much.
Take care. Thanks, Jason.
Hello. If you enjoyed this conversation, hit that subscribe button so we can meet again. If you don't, I'll be stuck in an infinite loop. So pull that part by clicking the subscribe and help me out. You can further support us by leaving us a kind review from wherever you are listening. At the end of the year, I will choose a reviewer to send a special gift to, and it might just be you. I look forward to seeing you here next week for a new adventure. If I can find my way out of this endless loop. See ya.